Okay, guys, so I want to talk about translations. So translations are a slide horizontally or vertically. And so we're going to look at how this affects the parent functions that we just saw in video 1. And so, for example, if we take a quadratic, and so we have f of x, and so a quadratic is the x squared, remember? So the parent function is this. But let's say you're given one that has a translation, right? So a translation is going to be a slide, which means you're going to have a plus or a minus somewhere, okay? So translations are adding or subtracting. And so, for example, if we want to have a vertical translation, so vertical, it's going to be on the outside. And so we're going to have something like f of x is equal to x squared minus 5. And so it's not inside with the x, it's on the outside. And so when it's on the outside, we're getting a vertical, your y values, okay? So this tells me that my parent function is going to move down 5 because I'm subtracting, okay? So what does that do for my table? Well, remember the table for the parent function in the first video, right? We had the parent function. And so we used -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And so we got 4, 1, 0, 1, 4, right? And so now I'm subtracting 5 from just the y values, okay? So on the table, I'm only messing with the y values. So I'm going to be subtracting 5 from my y values, okay? Because it's a translation, and so I'm adding or subtracting something. And in this case, it's on the outside, and so when it's on the outside, it's the y values, okay? So 4 minus 5 gives me a -1. 1 minus 5 gives me a -4. 0 minus 5 gives me -5. 1 minus 5 gives me -4. And 4 minus 5 gives me -1. These are now your new y values. And so if I graph this, the x's stayed the same, and the y values are the ones that changed. And so if you graph this, right, then I'm going to have -2, -1. So right here. I'm going to have -1, -4. I'm going to have 0, -5. I'm off my graph a little bit. And then I have 1, -4. And I'm going to have 2, -1. And so my v is a little off, sorry. My v-shaped, this point was a little off. Okay, all it did was it moved it down by 5. Okay, so for the table, I only subtracted by 5. For the graph, it moved my y values down by 5 because it's on the outside. And then verbally, if we needed to write this, we would say that it had a vertical translation of 5 units down. Okay? Because the 5 units down, right, the translation means it's a slide, and then 5 units down vertically means my y values. Okay? So let's look at another one when it's horizontal. So that was vertical. So I'm going to keep the parent function. That way we can still see it. But then I'm going to do a translation now where it affects my x values, right? And so if I have one, let's just make one up. Okay, so now it's on the inside. And when I say inside, it's either the inside of the parentheses for a quadratic, inside of the absolute value for absolutes, or inside the square root for square roots. So it's inside or it's next to the x, right? Then it's affecting the x. And so because this is inside and it's by the x, it's going to affect the x. But it's going to affect it opposite. So because this says x minus 3, really what that means is on the graph, I'm going to have x plus 3, which means it's going to move it to the right 3 in the positive direction, okay? So when we're talking about the x's, it's the opposite, okay? And so in this case, we're going to add 3 to all of my x values from my parent function. And so from my parent function, I still have this table over here. I'm now going to add 3 to my x values. Okay, I'm trying to make some more room. And so when I add 3 to my x values, what happens? Well, we get 3 minus 2, so that's 1. 3 minus 1, that's 2. 0 plus 3 gives me 3. 1 plus 3 gives me 4. And 3 plus 2 gives me 5. Okay? So if I were to graph this, I now have my x values and my y values are going to stay the same. So I'm going to have 1, 4. And then 2, 2, 1, sorry. I'm going to have 3, 0. And I'm going to have 4, 1. And then I'm going to have 5, 4. And so now my parabola, you can see, got moved over to the right by 3. Because it was at 0, 0, the parent function, and it moved over 3. Okay? And so verbally, what does that mean verbally? Verbally, this had a horizontal translation of 3 units to the right. Okay? So that's translations. The next video is going to be dilations.